Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode, 1953 Project High Dive. When the Air Force started raining rubber dummies on New Mexico. If you ever want a masterclass in how military bureaucracy attempts to explain away a UFO legend, look no further than Project High Dive, sometimes referred to as Operation High Dive. When the United States Air Force released its landmark 1990s investigative documents, the Roswell Report. Case closed, they needed a plausible terrestrial explanation for why dozens of credible witnesses, ranchers, engineers, and desert travelers swore up and down that they had seen small, human-like bodies scattered across the New Mexico sand. Their solution? Project High Dive, a top-secret 1950s initiative where the military routinely dropped life-size, rubber-skinned crash test dummies out of the stratosphere. If you ever want to understand the lengths to which the United States military will go to solve a physics problem while accidentally giving UFO researchers a lifetime supply of conspiracy material, you need look no further than Hurling Air Force Base in southern New Mexico during the 1950s. Rest assured, Project High Dive wasn't some shadowy alien containment protocol designed to mop up crash saucers. It was something arguably much funnier and slightly more unhinged. A high-stakes aerospace medical experiment centered entirely around dropping expensive, human-shaped mannequins out of the stratosphere. To understand why the Air Force was suddenly hurling rubber people out of balloons, you have to remember the absolute breakneck pace of the Cold War aviation boom. As the military violently thrust itself into the jet age and began edging toward the literal threshold of space, pilots started flying higher and faster than ever before. But this technological leap came with a horrific logistical catch. If a jet engine blew up or an aircraft failed at 90,000 feet, the pilot was staring down the barrel of an unassisted supersonic freefall through near-vacuum conditions. At that altitude, stepping out of a cockpit isn't a graceful parachute jump. It is an immediate encounter with a hostile freezing void. The military realized they had a terrifying blind spot. They had no earthly idea what actually happened to a human body during a miles-long plummet from the edge of space. Did the limbs rip off? Did the blood instantly pool into the feet? Did the sheer velocity turn a pilot into an involuntary high-altitude spinning top? Naturally, the Air Force couldn't just throw a few volunteer airmen out of a balloon at 90,000 feet to see what happened. Mostly because human rights lawyers and base commanders tended to frown upon spontaneous atmospheric human sacrifice. So, engineers had to get creative. They engineered a specialized fleet of anthropomorphic test dummies for Project High Dive. Do not confuse these with the cheap plastic mannequins you see modeling winter coats at a local department store. These were heavy, highly sophisticated instruments of science. They featured custom aluminum skeletons, intricately jointed mechanical limbs, and thick, rubberized synthetic skin designed to precisely mimic human weight distribution, flexibility, and mass. They were packed to the gills with internal telemetry gear, accelerometers, and recording devices to capture every agonizing G-force and aerodynamic twist of the descent. In short, long before modern automotive crash test dummies became household names, the Air Force was busy building high-altitude, rubber-skinned space voyagers, and then gleefully tossing them out of giant polyethylene balloons to see how badly they broke when they hit the New Mexico desert floor. If you thought launching instrumented mannequins out of airplanes was peak military eccentricity, you clearly haven't met the 1950s Air Force ballistics team. Once Hurling Air Force Base engineers finished building their sophisticated rubber-skinned space dummies for Project High Dive, they had a very important logistical question to answer. How on earth did we get them up to 90,000 feet? The answer, naturally, was to employ giant, translucent polyethylene balloons, standing over 200 feet tall, monsters of the sky that looked like floating silver-skinned zeppelins. Tethered beneath these floating giants were the heavy, jointed test dummies, quietly waiting to be sacrificed in the name of aerospace science. And once those release mechanisms snapped, the ensuing descent was nothing short of a violently bizarre, high-altitude freak show. Without stabilization chutes to keep things civil, scientists quickly discovered a terrifying law of stratospheric physics. Human-shaped objects falling through thin air love to turn into organic ceiling fans. Left to their own aerodynamic devices, the falling dummies would routinely lock into a catastrophic high-speed flat spin, whipping around at up to 200 revolutions per minute. To put that in perspective, that is roughly the spin rate of a high-speed kitchen blender. The centrifugal force generated by a 200 RPM spin was nothing short of biological carnage. It aggressively pulled blood into the head and extremities, bursting capillaries, and ensuring that any living pilot attempting such a stunt would be instantly incapacitated, or worse, long before they ever opened a parachute. It turns out that falling from space is bad enough. Spinning like a rotisserie chicken at Mach speeds is truly where the Air Force drew the line. After enduring a supersonic plummets and a few thousand rotations on nature's most aggressive carousel, these heavy aluminum skeleton dummies would finally run out of sky and slam violently into the New Mexico desert floor. The aftermath was rarely a graceful landing. Upon impact, the dummies would frequently pop open, shedding internal telemetry boxes, scattering aluminum bones, or lying crumpled in the sagebrush until sweaty recovery teams in jeeps tracked them down with direction finders. Imagine you are a local rancher or a tired traveler driving across the remote New Mexico expanses in the mid-1950s. You pull over to check a fence line, and suddenly you stumble across a mangled, rubber-skinned, humanoid-looking figure lying face down in the dirt, missing an arm, surrounded by strange metallic instruments. Is it any wonder that local folklore rapidly upgraded these high-altitude physics casualties into crashed extraterrestrial pilots? The Air Force was literally raining mutilated rubber people onto the desert floor and expecting nobody to ask questions. Of course, all this chaotic high-altitude abuse wasn't just an elaborate excuse to terrify rural New Mexico. The gruesome sacrifice of hundreds of rubber dummies ultimately served a noble, history-making purpose. The data harvested from these spinning, crashing mannequins paved the way for human survival in the vacuum of space. It directly enabled legendary leaps like Project Excelsior, where Air Force Captain Joseph Kittinger famously stepped out of a gondola at a mind-boggling 102,800 feet, surviving a terrifying flat spin of his own to prove that a human being could cross the threshold of space and live to tell the tale. So the next time you hear a skeptic argue that those classic 1950s reports of small, gray, limp bodies dragged out of the New Mexico desert were just government cover-ups for alien crash sites, remember the truth. They weren't aliens at all. They were just heavy-duty, aluminum-boned, rubber-skinned science dummies, proof positive that sometimes the true history of the Cold War is infinitely funnier than any conspiracy theory. When the United States Air Force finally decided to sit down in the 1990s and write an official report tackling decades of persistent, deeply awkward rumors about dead extraterrestrials strewn across the New Mexico desert, they faced a monumental public relations crisis. How do you neatly sweep away generations of witness testimonies claiming the military hauled 4-foot-tall, gray-skinned entities out of the sand? If you are a clever government investigator, you don't deny the physical descriptions. Instead, you lean into them with a straight face and offer an explanation so magnificently bizarre that it sounds like a rejected script from a Cold War sitcom. Those weren't aliens, folks. Those were our crash test dummies. Thus was born the Air Force's ultimate narrative pivot, transforming the high-altitude physics casualties of Project High Dive into the official terrestrial scapegoats for the entire Roswell mythology. According to the multi-volume declassified investigation, the Roswell Report, case closed, the Air Force realized they had a golden PR bridge sitting right in their historical archives. They pointed out a glaring chronological hiccup in many civilian accounts. While the iconic debris field and press release happened in July 1947, a vast majority of the specific, blood-curdling tales involving small, limp bodies being hauled out of the desert by armed military trucks didn't actually date back to 1947 at all. Instead, they belong to the 1950s. The official narrative goes something like this. Local ranchers, travelers, or unfortunate hunters would be minding their own business out in the remote New Mexico brush when they would stumble upon an active military recovery team frantically loading a mangled, rubber-skinned, humanoid-looking mannequin into the back of a truck after a high-altitude balloon plunge. Over the decades, human memory proved to be a wonderfully chaotic editor. The Air Force argued that witnesses suffering from temporal compression effortlessly stitched these two eras together, seamlessly blending their hazy recollections of 1950s dummy drops with the 1947 Roswell weather balloon headlines to accidentally upgrade a secret parachute test into an interstellar tragedy. In short, your uncle didn't see an alien autopsy team. He just stumbled upon a heavily traumatized aluminum bone science dummy that had just survived a 200 RPM flat spin from the stratosphere. For skeptics and institutional defenders, Project High Dive is hailed as a brilliant piece of historical detective work. It is the ultimate rational Swiss Army knife, neatly slicing away the grossest, most sensational elements of UFO lore with the cold, sterile edge of aerospace engineering. But for UFO researchers, ufologists, and connoisseurs of the absurd, the Air Force's official explanation is a goldmine of endless dark humor. Think about what the government is essentially asking a skeptical public to swallow when you read between the lines of the report. They are solemnly declaring, please completely disregard those persistent rumors of dead extraterrestrials. Those small, gray, limp bodies your relatives saw the military dragging out of the brush weren't visitors from another star system. They were just scientifically modified rubber mannequins we cheerfully hurled out of a 200-foot-tall balloon at 90,000 feet. There is a staggering, beautiful irony to it all. If you reject the alien hypothesis, you are left with a government that casually rains mutilated, rubber-skinned human facsimiles onto unsuspecting rural communities like some kind of dystopian meteor shower, entirely neglecting to tell the locals beforehand. Whether you view Project High Dive as a stroke of historical genius that solved a half-century mystery, or simply as the most unintentionally hilarious bureaucratic alibi ever committed to paper, it has rightfully earned its place in New Mexico lore. It proves an enduring, undeniable truth about human history. Whether you are dealing with fumbled Cold War spy balloons, secret stratospheric parachute drops, or the lingering ghost of a crashed flying saucer, the New Mexico desert is simply a very, very strange place to drop things from the sky. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archive Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru, Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact and the Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute exploration into the evolution of ufology, perfect for your daily plunge into decoding hidden messages from outer space, designed to raise awareness and foster human evolution. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's episode.